In the next 3 minutes, I'm going to give you the history of worship. And of course, it's going to be very thorough. As soon as we get the screen switched over. I have a lot of visuals for you today, and we're going to look at a little bit about what worship might look like and try to paint a picture of it. But let's start at the very beginning. Once upon a time, God created people. And as the story goes in the Bible, they lived in harmony with God. There were no barriers. There was no pretense. There were no clothes. They were naked before God, physically and otherwise. Everything was theirs, except for one little tree. And they just lived with God, and that was their worship, and every day they were with God. But pretty soon, the fighting started. We had Cain and Abel. One had a better offering than the other, if you remember the story, and a fight broke out, and one was jealous, and one ended up getting killed in the process. And you didn't know the worship wars started so early, did you? And all of a sudden, we had this very troublesome mathematical equation that said, me is greater than you. And that's how it all started. Then we get to the history of the Hebrews and the Jewish people, and they developed a sacrificial system, and they would offer animals and grain and other things on the altar as a symbolic act of that they were bringing something of value to God, or maybe not so much of a symbolic act. They were bringing something of value to God and putting it on the altar. And they set up this whole system, but it quickly turned sour, and along the way, at some point, you get the division between Jews and Samaritans, for example, and they were saying to each other, no, you worship here and not here. You use this scripture, not that scripture. You eat this animal, but you don't eat this animal. We're right, you're wrong. There was a division. They hated each other. They would fight. They would attack each other. And once again, the troublesome equation is, me is greater than you. Now, along comes Jesus, who tries to sort all of this out. And in John 4, he's talking with a Samaritan woman at the well. Remember that Jesus is a Jew, she's a Samaritan, they don't like each other. And Jesus tries to explain to her, a time is coming when it won't matter what mountain you're on. A time is coming, and as he says, has now come, when you will worship God in spirit and in truth. Worship is about yourself and your spirits and coming before God, not at this place or that place or this time and that time. Jesus tried to explain it. But then the fights start again. Actually, they never stopped. And at one point, we had the division between the Western Church and the Eastern Church, the Roman Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church. And it was over where the capital of Christendom was, whether you had to listen to the Pope, whether you could use icons and worship or not, how you did communion, who took communion. And they were split, and they fought. And me was greater than you. And then do you remember what happened when people started suggesting that maybe we could worship and read the Bible in another language other than Latin? You got killed for saying that kind of thing. And so the fights continued. And of course today, organ or guitar. Now I'll just point out to you, there are several places in the Bible where it mentions come to God and sing to Him with stringed instruments. So therefore, the guitar is more biblical than the organ. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. The question is, I love the organ, by the way. The question is, what does worship look like? Let's draw a picture of it. Jesus told this parable in Luke, the Gospel of Luke, where he said there was a Pharisee and a tax collector. Pharisee comes to the temple and says, I thank you, God, that I am not like these other people. These people who do wrong, I fast twice a week, I tithe, I give 10%, I worship correctly. And then along comes the tax collector, and remember, we don't like tax collectors. They take our money, and they're a part of the occupying government. And he says the tax collector doesn't even look up, beats his breast, and says, have mercy on me. I am a sinner. And Jesus says, that is worship. And he went home justified before God. So maybe worship looks like this. This is a very traditional, long-time way that people would worship or show reverence to someone. In the ancient times, they would do it before masters or kings or whatever. It's a fall prostrate. There's a word for this that we find behind the English, and it's proskuneo, a Greek word. It means to kiss toward, literally. That's what it literally means. But to fall prostrate, to worship, to bow down. And when we're in this position, we've changed the equation. We say, you are greater than me. I owe you something. I am bringing you something. Have your way with me, is what this picture says. We read in Romans where Paul said, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Offer your bodies. Now, if you do a Google image search for worship, this is a lot of what you get. So maybe it looks like this. Looks like he's offering himself, arms outstretched, hands up, here I am. Or if we take it more literally, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, how about that? Just lay it out on the stump. Here I am. Now there's another word we encounter for this, and this one is paristemi, which means to offer or present. It's another word that's translated worship sometimes. Maybe that's what it looks like. Or we read later in Romans where Paul says, you are the body of Christ. Just like one body with many members, you have your hands, your ears, your feet. The body of Christ is one, but with many different people who have different roles to play. And then we have that great passage about the early church in Acts where it says the believers were together, they broke bread in people's homes. That's where they went to church most of the time. And they sold their possessions and gave to those who were in need, and they were just this common bonded group. They were living faithfully in the church, as the church, and God provided the growth, they said. And so maybe it looks kind of like this. You know, this picture of Jesus, and there we all are as a part of Christ's body, all different people who do all different things, but united in one purpose. And the passages kind of say that worship has to include this, that we come to God together. There's a togetherness aspect to it, where we are different colors, stripes, preferences, but we come together and open our hands to one another and close our hands around each other's in a common bond. No person is first or at the top. There's another Greek word for this in the Greek New Testament. It's koinonia, which you can translate fellowship, but for Baptists that means potluck. And there's a little deeper meaning here. Koinonia is one of those words that's hard to translate because it captures the essence of what happens when people come together for a common purpose. But the only way it can happen, it starts with changing this equation we were struggling with. Instead of me is greater than you, we have to at least get to me is equal to you. I know it's not good grammar. I'm doing it that way for a reason. Or even me is less than you. Or maybe it's not even me versus you. Maybe it's we. When we come before God, it's always we. Let me ask you something. Why do we do graduation parties? You know, we're in the midst of that right now. People are having graduation parties. When somebody's graduating, why do we throw a party and go to all this trouble and set a date and a time and organize it and get everybody there at the same time and make all the food and clean the house and deal with the crowd of people? Why do we do that? I've got a better idea. Why don't, when you've got somebody graduating, just have them call up all their friends and say, come by when you want to and tell me congratulations. And then you can leave. Why don't we do that? Because something happens when people come together. What if I were to zoom in on one of these people? Now, if it was just her, If she was walking around like that with this look on her face and yelling and screaming and throwing her hands up and running around, and it was only her, we'd have to take her away. But if you put her in the context of the group, you're not worried about her. Something mysterious and good and powerful happens when people come together for the same reason. That's why we do it. Because there's something powerful in community. Ekklesia is another Greek word. It literally means the ones called out. Does anyone know what English word we use to translate this in your Bible? Church. I heard it over here. Church. That's the word that's translated church. The ones called out, or the people gathered. Church is always we, never me. Remember that the next time you hear yourself or someone say, I can do church on my own. By the very definition, you cannot. The church, I like this image, don't you? The church is built of the people. After the service, we're going to go outside and try it. And take a picture. You remember Cain and Abel? How it all started out? God created us to do this, not this. Finally, that passage we read first in 1 Chronicles, David has done something wrong. He took this census. Now, what's the big problem with taking a census? Well, a number of things. First of all, when you take a census, you're not counting women and children, not back in those days. You're counting your fighting men. That's what you're counting. And so to take a census is to say, we're ready for battle. And it was also a big hassle. Do you remember what happened in the Christmas story when a census took place? They had to travel. Mary was 9 months pregnant or whatever. Big hassle. There was absolutely no reason for David to do this. So God was displeased with him for doing it. And Gad comes to tell him this, and he goes, he's going to offer a sacrifice and atone for his sin. And he goes to the threshing floor of this guy named Araunah. And he comes to him and he says, I need to use your stuff. And he says, take it. Take whatever you need. And of course, he's overwhelmed because the king has come to visit him. And so he's saying, oh my gosh, the king is here. And he bows down prostrate and he says, take whatever you need. Here's the ox. Here's the threshing floor. Here's the grain. Here's the wood. Take it. And when he makes that offer to David, David's response is one of the most profound statements in the entire Old Testament for me. Do you remember what David said? I will not take for the Lord what is yours or sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing. It's not worship unless I've sacrificed something, David says. It has to cost me something. I can't worship like that. It doesn't cost me enough. Now, pastors hear a lot of comments about worship on the way out the door. That is not one of them. That was a great service, but I didn't sacrifice enough. There wasn't enough songs I didn't know. I didn't have enough money with me to give. It didn't cost me enough to be here. I've never heard that one. I've never said that one. But that's what David said. I'm not going to worship if it doesn't cost me anything. It's not worship if it doesn't cost me something. I will not take for the Lord what is yours or sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing. What did you sacrifice to be here? Why are you here? All these pictures we looked at, did you notice something in common? This guy. Did you notice the open hand? Hang on, I'm going to make you dizzy for a minute. Do you remember this picture? See the open hand? Remember that strange picture? See the open hand? Even this picture, they don't have hands, but go with it. The open hand, you can't hold hands with somebody unless you open yours first. Did you hear that? You can't join hands with someone unless you open yours first. Do you remember this picture? David. Even he has an open hand there. What does worship look like? For me, it's the open hand. Because when my hands and arms are like this, I can both give and receive. And I cannot receive until I have let go of what I'm holding on to. I cannot receive until my hands have opened to give something to God or to others. Worship starts with what I give. That's what David taught us. Worship is about what I give, not what I get. It starts with what I give. And only when I give can I receive the things that we come looking for: hope, peace, wisdom, an answer to prayer, a word from God, an experience with Him. Only when we let go do our hands open and we're ready to receive. Now, every once in a while we may make the comment to our family after we get in the car over lunch and say about a worship service, I didn't get anything out of that. Well, now don't misunderstand me. We want you to receive a gift from worship. However, if you didn't receive anything, maybe, just maybe, it's because your hand was not out like this, but you were more in this position. I can't receive anything like this. You just uncrossed your arms. I can't receive anything like this. My arms have to be out, ready to give, giving something to God. You remember when Jesus came into the temple and threw the tables around and drove out the money changers? And he said he was mad because it become a den of robbers. And he said, this is supposed to be a house of worship and prayer. Now, if Jesus were here today in the flesh, and he were walking out the door, and he has a complaint about the worship service he just attended, what would it be? The organ was too loud. I didn't know that song. The sermon was bad. The person behind me had bad breath. That baby wouldn't stop crying. The tech operator fell asleep. Feedback. I'm going through all the things we've dealt with, you know. Would that be his complaint? Or would he walk out saying, these people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me? That was his complaint about the worship of his day. Their hearts aren't in the right place. They're not here for the right reason. His complaint might sound much different than many that I have had myself. This summer, we're trying something new. And for some, maybe more than others, it's going to take some kind of sacrifice. Cheryl already mentioned it with the children. For my whole life, I've never worshiped at another time other than 11 o'clock. Or for the connection folks, they're going to have to get up 15 minutes earlier. You, maybe an hour and a half earlier, depending on whether you go to Sunday school or not. Things are going to sometimes go the way we want them to, and maybe sometimes not. And we're trying the new coffee hour summer party in the parlor after worship so that we have this time to be together in that group where something mysterious and good happens. We're trying something new. There are several reasons for it that you could ask the pastors or the worship committees. But it might take a change. It might take a sacrifice. It might take coming first with a hand ready to give. To give something to someone else, to sacrifice something, or to give something to God. Worship begins with this: I bring to God whatever it is that I have to give, and especially whatever it is I'm holding tight to. Regardless of the service time, it is very possible, whether it's 11 o'clock on Sunday morning or 10 o'clock on Saturday night, you could attend a worship service and leave having never worshiped. It's very possible. The question is, are we centered on the heart of worship? If we can do it this summer or beyond, if we can come with our arms outstretched, our hands open to our brother or sister in the faith who has some different worship preferences than I do, or is more okay with this time or that time than I am, or maybe my brother or sister who likes so-and-so's sermons better than the other so-and-so. If we come with our hands outstretched to our brothers and sisters, if we come with our hands outstretched toward God and the cross, it is then that I believe we will truly be worshiping in rare form.